Sounds good. Sounds good. Sounds
Thank
good.
you so much for watching Once and Often. Joining me today are sisters. Y'all see these beautiful faces? I'm so excited to introduce y'all to Miss Sarah Murphy and her wonderful sister, Dr. Patrice Martin. This is their first time sharing their story with me. I am over elated and I'm happy that they have decided to say yes to my request of having them share their story on my platform. So thank you all so much. Welcome. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Dr. Patrice. Hello.
Thanks for having us.
Hi. So, some of you, like I said, some of you may have already heard the story of Dr. Patrice and her sister. So, they kind of can't have one story without having the story of another, or tell their story without telling the story of the other. And so, because they are biological sisters, and y'all know on this platform, we talk to everyone fostered or adopted. And so, I kind of want to start with you, Sarah. You're the big sister, correct?
Yes, I'm the
Yes.
oldest.
You are the big sister. I mean, y'all look the same age. I mean, who's gonna know you're over 30? So, but you started your search for your sister, who you later learned at a certain age that was placed for adoption. Correct?
Mm. Well, um, well, I didn't like definitively know that she was placed for adoption, but I did know that she existed when I was a teenager, probably like maybe 14 or so. So when I found out my mother had another child after me, but before our younger brother.
Wow. So you're 14, 15 years old. You find
Mhm.
out, oh my God, I have another sister out there. That had to blow your mind.
Yes, it was just because it was a trying time. It's like already stressful enough being a teenager. Um, we had just came from foster care. We had been there almost 9 years, and we had just come home from foster care, and we hadn't lived, we hadn't been back for that long when we got the news about another sibling.
Gotcha. So you find this out. Did you jump right in on your search? Because I mean, as an adoptee, I've been searching since I knew my brother's name. So, and my biological mother's. Did you jump right in on the search to find out who your sister is, where she is, and what was going on?
I think initially I was just in shock when I heard the news, and like maybe there was even a part of me that didn't want to believe what my mother told me. And like she did have some mental health issues, so I also took that into consideration. But then after like maybe a couple years had went by, and then that's when I started searching. But then there was no internet or anything that you could just go. So I had to go and off of the story that my mother told us about her being found and that she was listed on the news. So I went to the library into the old like microfiche section and tried to find like I looked I started my search like in late October because my mom said that she believes that Patrice was born in late October. So that's what I always look from like maybe October 25th to Halloween, October 31st. And so I would just go and try to find any like archived newspaper or television information, but I never found anything.
See, I think what's important for us to pay attention to is the fact that you address the fact that one, your mother dealt with mental health issues, but even in that, she still told you because she
Hmm.
probably, a lot of mothers won't do that. The fact that she told you says a whole lot about who she is, who she was, and what she dealt with. She actually sat you down, even after coming out of an experience of your own of being in foster care
Hmm.
and saying, hey, let me explain to you a couple of things that happened. And I mean, at the time that Patrice was born, you were too young for her to tell you anyway, correct?
Exactly. I was about 3 years old, I believe,
Yeah.
when
And
Patrice
so
was born.
the fact that she shared that with you and didn't keep
Hmm.
it, so, I mean, I commend her for that, because as we know in the field of the adoption business, there's so many secrets, and that your sister could have remained a secret and you would have been out there not even knowing that you have another sister. So
And
kudos to Barb
I,
for that.
I also have to applaud the fact that she didn't just tell me, about Patrice. She told me who her father was. She, told me some information about his other children. So I actually initially, when I was searching, I found her sibling first. I found the dad's obituary. And so I reached out to one of the other siblings, because Patrice and I have different dads. And so her and my brother have the same dad, but their dad had three other daughters, I believe. And so I was able to reach out and actually talk to one of the other siblings, like maybe 2 years before I found Patrice.
Mm,
And I remember telling her, and I'm pretty sure like we talked about this recently, and I know she probably thought I was crazy when I called her phone, like, hey, we have some siblings in common,
mm,
and know where one is, but I'm searching for the other one. And so it was just something that I thought that even for my brother, that like I felt that as a human, he didn't know a lot about himself because he was missing part of his picture from, the dad side. So initially I was also searching for him so he could be made whole and finding out some of his information from his dad. And so I did contact the older sister, and I spoke with her, and I, left my information. I shared the information with our brother as well. And so I just, continued. And I want to say it's the oddest thing is that when I found her at the time, I wasn't really looking. It was just happenstance how things worked out. And so I, was given that information about her and her siblings. And so I had a complete picture, and I do applaud our mother for being so forthcoming with that information because she didn't have to tell us anything,
yeah.
but she told us everything.
And, and that's why I just want to just take a moment for us to just sit in that, because it is so quick. It is so easy, and we are so quick to demonize biological mothers who have to place it without knowing their backstory, without
Hmm.
knowing all that they've been through, without knowing, the trauma that they experience. We are so quick, and it is so easy for us to demonize parents. But in this case, your mom shared with you that you had a sister and even who her
Hmm.
father was. And I mean, which made it easy for you to search for her. So like, come on, we have to respect that and appreciate that. And so kudos to her for that. And then you find out, Dr. Patrice, your story. And so what did you learn about your mother before you found out that you were placed for adoption?
Actually, not much. Other than the fact that she said there was a. So I came at it from this angle that I've always known that I was adopted, but I later found out in I think my mid-20s, mid to late 20s, that I was actually abandoned. The article says that I was abandoned by a trash bin behind a mall. At That's no longer in service now, and my biological mom, I mean my adoptive mom, told me, that that was all she knew about the case, that I was pretty much abandoned, and that it just would be really hard probably at the time for me to find my biological family if I ever wanted to do so. But she moved forward, and she actually contacted the McKeesport Heritage Center, I believe it is, and found the article. It was on microfiche or something like that. There was an article in a very small paper.
Mm.
on October 28th that a child was found, and it states all that. And so that's pretty much all I knew for years. And then up late one night, flipping through the channels because I couldn't sleep, I saw the show Long Lost Family, and I was like, they really do this? They really there's a group of people that really hook up, adoptees that are looking for their family that has some kind of special cases.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to work that day, I just couldn't get it out of my head that they do that. And on my lunch break, I literally was eating my sandwich, and I took my chances to kind of just go find it. Do they have a casting call? Like, what is this show about? And I ended up, next thing I know, literally over my lunch break, about 45 minutes, I was a one-sheeter, and they asked, certain questions. I filled it out, and I emailed it to the list that was on there. And I didn't really think much of it. I was like, well, if I'm going to find out, and I went back to work,
Right. Yeah.
That day. And that was probably like May of 2018. And in November of 2018, I was called by what they call them now. The show is very sensitive on the terms that they use, but for all intents and purposes, the traditional like casting call person called and just did initial interview to see, if I could be on TV and all that other kind of stuff. Was still interested. And they sent me an Ancestry. They partnered with Ancestry and sent me a DNA kit, and we got rolling from there. And
so
they
sent you the kit.
Yeah. So when you agree to participate and be a part of them, you're agreeing to participate with Ancestry, but that because they're doing a show and because there is entertainment value and because of everything, that your information belongs to them for a while so that they can build the story out. Yeah. I was willing to do that. I signed on for it. I knew that. And I was willing to do that, for what it was. Mm-hmm. I really only thought that they would just be, I wouldn't have to necessarily shell out a whole bunch of money, mm-hmm. or I didn't really even know that much about I know a little bit about genetics and DNA because I was working in that area, but not so much about the ancestry and the matching with families and things like that. So, I just, in some naiveness, I was just like, yeah, I'll just go on the show. But it was a good night. If I'm going to find out any information, that's me, the researcher part of me. So I'm going to find out information. Let's see how we can get this information. That's really what it was. It was like a scientific experiment for me. So, in some regards, but, I'm so grateful, with everything, and we'll talk about that. But yeah, so months later, I was contacted, and they didn't really reveal all of everything that they had. Now they had found some folks, but they said, we'd like to kind of film you and see what we can come up with, and see if we find anybody. It was always see if we find.
Yeah.
My husband and I were kind of like, they're not asking you to come out to Pittsburgh and film anything if they didn't find anybody, but it was still that thing in the back of your head, like,
of course,
So anyway, that's how that went, and I applied, and I ended up on the show, and I was reunited with this beautiful young lady on the screen, and here we are. Yeah.
That's what I love, because Sarah, a moment ago you mentioned you weren't even looking for her at the time. Like, you knew about her, but I think as adoptees, our search is off and on. And even though you weren't adopted, you experienced foster care. And sometimes we'll go down this rabbit hole and we'll be searching for a month straight. And then it's like, okay, I'm not getting anywhere. Let me take a break. So you were in the moment of taking a break. Mm-hmm. And then what happened?
Well, it is so wild that over the course of my life, I guess initially when they found Patrice, they named her Angel. So, through the course of my life, when I was living in a certain neighborhood, there would be people that would come up to me, in my face, and would call me Angel, thinking I was this person, Angel. So like in my mind, this was my sister that I was looking for. So like I had stalked this angel person for years. Like anyone that ran up to me, thinking I was Angel, I would give them my number and like, hey, give Angel my number if you see her and tell her to call me. I'm looking for my sister. She could be my sister. So it was like, I think a lot of times that would like refuel my search is the angel sightings. And so I'm like, this has to be, the angel that I'm looking for, that we look so much alike that people are in my face thinking that, I'm this other person. So in 2019, I was planning a huge family reunion. And so I'm like, it would be fun to find out some information about our ancestors. And so I bought, at the time, it's wild that like, I feel like God spoke to me or universe or ancestors spoke to me and told me, hey, buy a DNA test. And so at the time I went on the website, they happened to be on sale. So I bought multiple tests. I got one for my son, did myself, and then I bought like two more in hopes of like passing those out at the reunion. And so we did the test, and it gives you a time frame on when you should get the results back, but they came back several weeks early. Like one test, which was my son's test, came back early, and because I had the test listed both under my name, I wasn't like sure initially. Like it was saying that I had two aunts. And so I'm like, two aunts? Like, who could these two aunts? Then it dawned on me it was Joseph's DNA. And so when I started looking through the one aunt that he was matched with, I knew because this is my father's daughter. And so my dad has never claimed me. And so, like, my whole life, he's been around, but he's never claimed me. But it just so happened that my sister, his daughter, took that test. And that's how I was able to compare her DNA to figure out that the other one had to be Patrice. And like I like sat with it for a while because it was a time in our family where I had just lost an aunt. On June 29th, my aunt Patricia had passed away. And the very next day, on June 30th, is when that DNA match came. So it's like my family was still dealing with, my aunt's passing. So I really didn't even reach out to any of them. So I, instantly went to the Ancestry Messenger and reached out that way. And, from that part is like, it was kind of nerve wracking because I thought I was talking to Patrice, but it was actually people from the show. And so they're like, well, why do you think that this is her? And kept asking me questions. And I'm like, hey, I just want to know, are you my sister? And they're like, well, it's like, it's telling me you are. So, but sometimes there are other family members that manage the account for people. I'm thinking, well, maybe, it's a relative of hers or something like, and so I'm talking to the people, but they're still asking me more questions and giving me answers. And eventually they tell me they're working with a woman who's actually searching for her family. And then, that's when they, after I told them, the information that I knew, that's when they shared that information with me because I knew about them all. I knew like around the time frame. I didn't know the exact date, but I knew it was like end of October. I knew the name of the mall, and that's when they told me like we can confirm that this is the person that you've been looking for.
So this is huge because you are like, hey, I did the test. I'm going to find my sister, and then you find out, wait a minute, are you my sister or are you not? And then they're like, hey, they're drilling you, asking you all of these questions. And then it gets to, do you want to be on the show? So you have to be like, okay, who's playing games with me?
Mm-hmm. Like,
what y'all doing?
It's like I thought, like initially I did think I was being punked or something like that. So like I think even it wasn't until because they sent me a clip of the show.
Mm-hmm.
And so, or they asked me, have you ever heard of a show called Long Lost Family? Of course, we all go straight to Google and look up. So when I initially Googled it, I only saw the UK version. I'm like, oh my God, my sister, we're going to be having a spot of tea. And, she's in the UK. There's like so many things were going on in my mind. And I'm like, oh, she's in the UK. Like, this is pretty wild. So finally, they sent me the paperwork in the mail and overnight FedEx pack. And I'm like, well, maybe, this isn't a joke. Like maybe these people, but of course I still went and looked up this production company because I had never heard of, the show or anything. And sure enough, it was the real deal. But, I still, even after all of these years, I'm still kind of in shock. It's almost like watching a movie of someone else, but it's like your own life for real. But it's still shocking to me how things played out.
And then you realize, oh my God, this is the doing of my sister, who was obviously in search of me and other family members. Like, so Dr. Patrice, you see what you started? You just so Doc, now listen. I just want our viewing audience to understand why it's so important that I address you as Dr. Patrice, because what you said a moment ago, and y'all, she has given me permission. She's like, Jasmine, please. But when you understand her story and how things started for her, and the fact that she has gone on, received her education, and matriculated all the way until she received her doctorates, I think Dr. Patrice is more deserving than just Patrice, because she's already stated how her story started. So you go ahead, you take the test, and then the company or the production comes back and they say, hey, we found a match. What was that like for you?
Well, it unfolded for me during the taping. So they said, hey, yeah, we do kind of want to pursue your story. We're still doing some work, but come, because, we there is some information we found, but we would like to pursue your story, is the way they say it. So it unfolds so what you actually see there is me meeting her for the first time and me understanding. I interviewed by, some of the show or whatever. I don't want to give it away because I think it's important for people to watch, because I think it's more than just all of the stories too. And you'll hear why I say that. I think it's more than just a show where people get reunited. I think it's really the telling of triumph because of a larger system or a group of systems. And that's why to this day, I think, even sitting here now and, staring into my sister's face, it's still for all of us. It's just mind-boggling, for a whole lot of reasons. Like, we even talk all the time and we even uncover more reasons, and there's reasons why we feel obligated to do things like this and other things, because this didn't just happen by accident, so the show was a vehicle to get some stuff done, but there's still a lot more work to be done in these areas, and a lot more of awareness. But every single person's story there is one of, even if it doesn't pan out for them, like our reunion has panned out, it still was triumph over some really, really weird systems around the world. Like she said, there's a UK version, and the reason why there's a UK version, I'll beg to say, is because there's a whole foundling industry, in the UK. There's a whole, there's a lot of this stuff was around social norms and different things was promulgated there as well. And so, I just think that there's just a reckoning that's coming, if I can use that word. I know that there's some folks doing some really neat work in the adoptee space, using that word, but I think they've hit it spot on with that word reckoning, because it's a lot of us, with the advent of DNA and things like that. just doing this work and not even having to do, in some cases, doing a lot of work, but not having to do so much work, and are reconnected. And it's important. It's an important thing, work for people to have. And even if the other side doesn't reciprocate like mine did, at least they know, like Sarah always talks about, you need to know where you come from. Like you should be owed that, you know?
Yeah.
And
And I think,
I would like to add that I think that even for those people that do search it, it takes courage to step outside of that secret space
Mm-hmm.
and say, "Hey, I'm going to find where I come from, who I am," and I think that like Patrice was saying, like those systems that as like Black people, we're always searching for our ancestry because
Mm-hmm.
of the whole system of slavery snatched us from our origin stories as well. So there's always that search that we're always doing, and it does take bravery to step outside of
Mm-hmm.
your comfort zone and say, hey, I'm going to look for these answers or find. And everyone's not going to get the type of reunion that we had. But I still say that, I applaud the people that do step out on faith and look for
Mm-hmm.
their family members or search for, themselves and who they are. Because it definitely does take courage. And I always advise anyone that's going to do a DNA test that just be prepared for anything. Expect the unexpected because it's like opening Pandora's box. Literally, you
Mm-hmm.
open
exactly.
the family secret box, and all of these things can flow out, and they don't always come out in a positive way.
Yeah. And it's so true and it's so important, like you both said, that we have these conversations and that we have these
Mm-hmm.
talks, mainly for the simple fact that, I mean, in our case, we know that we were adopted,
Mm-hmm.
fostered or what have you. And so a lot of adoptees and a lot of children who were just fostered but aged out, they still don't know who their biological families are. But then not only that, as it relates to family secrets, you also have children, one who are raised in their biological family thinking that both their parents are their biological parents. And those secrets are even, I feel like those are even more hurtful than adoption and being in foster care because, they're being lied to their entire life.
Oh
And,
yeah.
and that's hurtful in itself.
Mm-hmm.
So when we start talking about, adoption and when we start to demonize, oh my God, how could she have done this? Well, we don't know because we don't know what life, because we didn't live that life. So it's so important for us to remove ourselves from how could they and that, demonizing mothers specifically, because of
Mm-hmm.
course, as we are the ones that carry the children, we're the ones who will likely give up the child. But at the same time, there are a lot of fathers out there who know about their children and still won't step up and do the right thing. I mean, even in your case, Sarah, the fact that your father
Mm-hmm.
knew about you but would deny you, and see, DNA telling on everybody. I just
Mm-hmm.
said that DNA is telling on everybody. So when we start getting into, oh my God, I thought this was my dad. Nope, because DNA told us the truth. So, we have to have these conversations, and we have to normalize the fact that mental illness is real. We have to normalize the fact that so many families have secrets. We think we know the truth, but deep down, we really don't. And so when we get to a point where, in your case, being left in the trash bin, well, we don't know what happened before that. We don't know what led up to that point because it's not easy. No woman, no pregnant mother ever thinks to themselves, oh, once this happens, this is what I'm going to do. No mother wants to put their children
No.
in harm's way.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And I think you're bringing up some really, really good, excellent points of where I just have moved on to, and where I've kind of like advocate from the space that I advocate for others from. And the first is notice what Sarah and I will never say. We will, and I can say this even though I know I'm speaking for her mouth, I can say this. We will never say that people should not be accountable for their own actions.
Right.
That is not what we're saying. Um, we're saying that actions, though, there's things that move people to act.
Yeah.
And there's circumstances that move people to act. And I think that those things need to be looked at in their totality. We both have, when I think about it, I've never actually even, you're getting a featured talk from me, because I've never even talked about this so much. But I think we both in our own way have had our own time to have our conversations with our mom about the stuff that we feel like, at times she should have been accountable for.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And not in it's just the realness of, hey, mom, even though your illness allowed you to be out here, series of illnesses allowed you to be out here, this is kind of where these are things we weren't able to get in that. And I think there's some, in my case, I won't say full, because of the timing of things. My mom passed, but there's some reconciliation. I'm not going to speak for Sarah, but I think both of us were able to reconcile in our own minds without a life full of bitterness, like some of the why, but also have the balance scale of being able to say to a person that there are things we missed out because of, right?
I think that for me, I didn't, I don't know, I blamed her a lot. And I'm, now willing to admit that I was angry with her for a long time until I became a mother. And it put me in a space to like, was this huge light bulb that went off that like, oh my God, like being a mother, like is confusing and
Right.
scary and like changes your whole body, your whole perception of what the world is. And I'm like, oh my God, like I could potentially be in the same position my mother was,
Yeah.
even though I'm trying the best to be the best mother I could be. And that I think was once again God, the universe, the ancestors, like, hey, try to give me that clarity that I didn't have before being, giving birth to this little human. That there were times where, when I was at work, I couldn't afford childcare, and I would take my son to work and sneak him in supply closets and things like that. So I've had to make some very difficult decisions, some hard decisions that I literally cried walking away from that supply closet. But then it also was like that aha moment that, you judge this woman for the choices that she made, and look at you, your baby's in the supply closet while you're trying to work, And so I think that that clarity was something that without having being put in that position of having a child's father who didn't necessarily want to be supportive at the beginning, like all of those things that I kind of blamed her. And then when I was like, oh, shoot,
Right.
like it can happen to me too.
Right.
And so I think that that's where my understanding came from.
Yeah. We had a really neat conversation a couple of weeks ago, didn't we, about how, just relationships and men. And I was just talking to her about how, like, I totally get the whole thing of, I can't really necessarily be mad at her about the secret dad thing, because I've struggled a lot with the concept, and I've really articulated this month. You're getting all these features of the fact that I literally have a dad that doesn't know that I existed, and then he died. Like that just, I don't know. That's just something weird. A lot of late discovery adoptees were kind of resonate with me for some reason. In the adoptee world, people either find people and then they found out they just died, or they find people and then they just die. I don't know what that phenomenon is, but that's a whole nother thing we could look at. But yeah, so when this whole thing was revealed to me on the show, okay, yeah, you have this family and you have this, everybody, this is great, but we do have to tell you, your father passed away in 2012. And it's like, oh, okay. And then throughout the whole story, though, he actually carried on. Once I really got to talk to my sister, he had a relationship with my mom. Now, whether everybody in the world knew it in a traditional relation, it was a relationship. And that was a really neat conversation that Sarah and I had about, everybody's dating men that, didn't necessarily, maybe you weren't the only girlfriend they had or whatever at the time, or, they kept dating you, whatever, dating a whole bunch of other people and you weren't necessarily. And so it really just brings a really, what I like to call like a neat humanity to the story. And it helps me to shed all bitterness of it, because I'm like, yeah, girlfriend, I get that with that. Like, I kind of like see my mom in that space, in that vein. Like, I get that. I get that. That could have very well been me. Mine is the hospital setting, because, well, I did work in a hospital, but I worked in a different way. But mine is the whole nursing setting and, hospital. But in my younger years, that could have very well been me. I just have never had, kids come into the mix of something. But I keep that part. Yeah. I keep that, and I think that me staying near to myself and near to my faith allows me just to keep my heart so open to hearing. I'm so intrigued by other stories as well. Because we're humans, we're people, right? And we all have story, and that's not meant for us to one up one another or down another. It's a story, and it needs to be. But I do think that what I'm trying to say is that we can learn from that.
Absolutely. I
will tell you, I know, my sister, she just revealed, some things that she's gone through as a mother. And I myself revealed things that, that I've gone through as a person. And I think on the other side of understanding some things, as we're still learning and have understood some things, we just want to make things better and have that clarity for our lives moving forward. Yep. But there's no naivety here that women and children end up in crises every day. Yeah. And I'm here to let people know that happens, and to try to see if we can use the systems that we have to mitigate that.
And you're so right. And that takes me back to a point when you got to a point where you realized, the both of you had to give your mom grace, because we live, and I say this all the time, but we live in ignorance. All of us live in a level of ignorance because we don't know everything, and we don't know what we don't know. And so now that you're able to give her grace, when you first found out the trash bin, what were your feelings in that moment?
That was, I mean, that's a hard one, right?
Yeah.
I talk a lot about life being on a journey. When I say that I'm able to do that, I also hold space for, that's jacked up. Right. That's really messed up. But I think I hold space for, I was left out there, but I was left out there because there's a whole group of circumstances why I was left out there. And I think that does make it different.
I think that, like, from the understanding that the story that I was told, that, like, that position and that place where she put her, it was intentional, is that she knew a family that owned a business in this mall, and she felt like that family would be a better family to take care of her child than she could. So she left this baby behind this business where she knew that that's where they put their cardboard boxes from their stock. And so in her mind, the people that she knew would
They'll
be the
find
one that would find Patrice. But when that didn't happen, she was the one that actually called
Yeah.
to make sure that she was found, because nobody would have known the baby was back there. Unless the people found her or whoever left the baby back there, would have known where she was located. And so there were like things that she told me that she dressed Patrice in my baby clothes. She swaddled her in blankets that she covered me in as a baby. So there were like so many things from the perception that I received that it wasn't just that she tossed this baby in, in a trash bin.
And
Or
yeah, that's important. And I think that's a big important thing to know. And I try to tell people, is like, there's some recent legislation. We can talk about that with the baby box stuff. But, she called the police kind of, anonymously on herself. Like it wasn't, so it was like, I have this moment of crises, but, and a lot of times you see that, like, you see like moms like have this moment of clarity, like, no, this is still my kid. I can't do for this person. And I think, just think about what that is. Like, I'm having this moment of crises, but I'm still being a mom in that.
Yeah.
That's mind-boggling.
Because her job, she's still trying to protect you.
Yeah. I'm still being a mom. I'm still doing the mom thing. And that, I just can't imagine the honest to God, I cannot imagine the physical anguish as being a woman, like, to be like, I know I cannot do this, but I have to put you, but you have to go here because I can't do this.
Yep. And can you imagine, I think one of the things that we talk about, and it's somewhat cliche, we can have it today, not have it tomorrow. Can you imagine how quickly a situation can change over the course of 9 to 10 months? So let's just say, for instance, someone is 7 months pregnant and everything is just they're in their glory. By the time they get to 7 months and a day, their whole entire life and situation can change. So now here I am carrying a child. Everything that just happened, I'm not able to do for this child. What do I do? And so it plays on your psyche. It plays on your physical being. It plays on you emotionally. It plays on your everything. So much to the point where, in the case of your mom, where she may have thought, this is my only option, because what else do I have? And, we don't know that. But the fact that she was kind and smart enough to do that, put you in a place where you were safe, or where she thought you were safe, and then call the police, even on herself, to say, hey, I think I saw something, or whatever the conversation was. She did that all in an effort to make sure that you got the care that you deserve, because in that period of time in her life, she just knew she wasn't able to.
And it's crazy. It's really crazy. If you guys, I like the turn that this conversation is taking, because a lot of times people don't focus on this piece of it, right? Yeah. They don't focus on the fact that the steps that a lot of these moms take. Okay, mine happen to be like the unconventional. Okay, I left my kid outside. But even the conventional moms, okay, you're a teenager, you're this and that, and you go to an agency, and you know that you're going to hand your, both of you probably cannot even conceive of it. Yeah. I know I can't, and I've never birthed a child. Like, put yourself in the shoes of the people at these agencies and churches or whatever it is, to actually hand your kid to someone because you don't have the resources. There's a book that's been written, and I can't wait to read it, by a woman named Gretchen Sisson, I think is her name. And I'm going to look it up and make sure that I quote her correctly. But it's Relinquished. And someone did an article on the book that just came out. It's called Relinquished. And guess what the statistic in this that was quoted in this article said? It was followed a group of birth mothers for 20 years. Okay. This person did this qualitative study. And guess what the common denominator with them of not having their children was anywhere between $1,500 in their pocket and $2,700 in their pocket. If they would have just had the resources that they need, they said, later on, I could have got it right. That's what we're talking about here.
But then even when you look at Patrice was left behind a mom, that when I found Patrice in June, on June 30th, to the time that we actually met in August, there were at least 3 babies left the same way. So Patrice wasn't an anomaly. That this is still happening right now as we're speaking. Someone's probably doing the same thing. So if we don't actually address the crises and those situations that force a woman into thinking that this is her best option, that like we can't break that cycle. And like Patrice, I was 40 something years ago, and it's still not much has changed for moms since that 40 something years until now, and not much had changed from that 40 years to the time that I had my son. That it could have been something so small that pushed me over that limit, because we don't talk about like postpartum depression and postpartum psychosis and things like that, but it's real. And I didn't know that I suffered when I had my son until there's a health network here that started setting up a group of moms, and it had like when they were rolling out the program, it had like an infomercial with like some of the moms telling their stories. And so every time I went into those appointments, they asked me, do you have a depression? Do you have this? Do you have that? And I just said no, because, from what I knew, I thought that I didn't. But once I heard those other mothers talk about what it felt like to them, I'm like, oh my God, I had that too. But I just didn't know what to look for, what it looked like. Because you can see on paper postpartum depression, check yes, no, maybe so. And, if you really don't know what you're looking at, you just go past that. That's just like, we'll even take like high blood pressure, for example. Is that like women sometimes have different symptoms than men have? So you could look at something and not necessarily know it's high blood pressure. And I think that it's the same for, like postpartum issues that women have. And we're only now just delving deep into that postpartum care. And look at where we're at, 2024.
Exactly.
And, and so women that suffered back then, how dare you be a woman who has the baby blues or don't want to be. So women were ostracized for not being perfect mothers to their children. So long before these babies come, we already have so much pressure on us to be a certain kind of a mother. And then now you see celebrities that have babies, their bodies are instantly back to normal. And, and you're like, there's so much pressure on the average woman to snap back, to go back to work, to automatically get back up and start jogging again, or whatever the case may be. And that's not the case.
Yeah, it's so true. Another thing that factors into that is the fact that we can be perfectly fine, but anything can trigger depression. Anything. When I had my oldest daughter, I just knew, the nurses, my friends had already had their children. The nurses in the hospital, they were telling me, oh, if you nurse, you'll build that bond. And my body wasn't producing the milk for her. And what I recently found out is that, it wasn't your body, it's the way that, her tongue sits or what have you. But regardless, I wasn't able to nurse. And even that was enough for me to feel like when my baby's just 3 or 4 days old, I have hell.
Yeah,
as a
it
mom.
failed. Wow.
Mhm.
Yeah. These are real things that we don't discuss because I was like, what's wrong with me? How come I
Mhm.
can't, nurse my child? That's a very natural thing.
Mhm.
What's going on? Even something as small as that can trigger depression. Now,
Mhm.
prior to her birth, oh yeah, I was in my right mind. But
Mhm.
just something as small as that
Mhm.
to a mother can trigger depression so much to the point where I could have likely just been like, I don't want to do this. And there are
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
many moms out there who figured,
Mhm.
I can't do this. Why? Because of something now.
Mhm.
Granted, you still have Prosobi, you still have Similac, you still have so
Mhm.
many other formulas on the shelf that would allow you to feed your child and give it
Mhm.
its nutrients. But when you want that
Mhm.
bond and when you want that connection and you can't get it, that
Mhm.
is enough to trigger depression. And
Mhm.
it's so weird because even as we talk about y'all's biological mom, in the case with my biological mother, my question was, how could you use drugs and you're carrying a child?
Yeah.
What were you thinking? How could you? What happened to you? And then when I met her in sobriety, she was sharp, very articulate woman, very smart, very intelligent. And I'm like, what happened all those years ago? And then, of course, when you realize you're getting to a point where this is not a topic that we can discuss, you kind of fall back. You want to leave those things
Mhm.
alone. But in the back of your mind, you still wonder, what happened? Why would all those
Mhm.
years ago you decide to use drugs while you're carrying a child? This is what we don't know because we live in ignorance and we don't know what we don't know. I don't know
Mhm.
what led her to that, but I do know what triggered my depression shortly after having a baby. We don't know. And there's a lot
Mhm.
that comes with being a mom. There's a whole lot because as
Mhm.
your body is protecting the child physically, as that child is growing in your womb, the moment that child reaches this side of the world, we really do still have those maternal instincts of protecting our children. And regardless of what that looks like, because it looks different to every mother,
Mhm.
we have Dr. Patrice. You know what I'm saying? So
Mhm.
it's not so much of where we can place judgment because who knows if I didn't have the support of my husband after having my baby,
Yeah.
you know? But
That's
But
yeah.
then
That's a big thing.
even when you look
absolutely.
at how I'll say like the public service announcement for adoption is set up, it's like, hey, give these people your baby. They can do a better job at it than you can. So I think that so many people like have that impression in
Mhm.
their mind that this is better for your baby.
Mhm.
And it was kind of even how I looked at adoption until meeting Patrice. Like I
Yeah.
looked at every adoption like Annie. Like,
Mhm.
okay, she went from rags to riches. She,
Yeah.
got this fabulous life and now she's rich and she's out of the orphanage, but we don't see
Mhm.
all of that other stuff, the
Mhm.
trauma that's associated.
Mhm.
But I think adoption is neatly packaged and sold as this better alternative than
Mhm.
single mom or better alternative than black mom or better alternative than African mom or
Wow.
it's always packaged with this neat little bow. And I think that people who in my mother's case, she didn't go to an agency, but in her mind, anything was better than her. And
Right.
I think that,
Wow.
we have to start there with uplifting
Yeah.
our women that
Wow.
they are enough. Who they are is enough for
Yep.
the children that they have. Like my mom might not have been enough for some other kids, but she was surely enough for the three
Yep.
that she
Mm.
gave birth to. Like I have
We.
a story of a cousin who had her children taken away because of intellectual disabilities. And my argument with her caseworker was that if her body could carry these babies for 9 months, she was enough. She had always been enough for the babies
Yep.
that she had. She had a set of twins. And I'm not going to lie to you. I am a certified teacher. I've worked in childcare all my life. Since I was younger, I was always taking care of other people's kids. But when I saw these twins' mother with them, she'll whip these babies up. You know, you wash a baby and they're all slippery and
Yeah.
I would be scared to death to do both of the babies at once. I would
Mhm.
carefully with one of the babies. She would whip them wet babies
Yeah.
like it was nothing because she was enough
Yeah.
for the babies that she
Mm-hmm.
carried in her body. And I think that so many women
Mm-hmm.
are, put in a position where they're led to believe they are not enough.
Yeah.
They're
Well,
led to believe that they can't
yeah.
be the mother that they need to be for their children.
So one of these concepts, I think we're talking about something deep that we talk about in just the adoption space only, um that I feel like my reason for being and fighting against is this whole thing of, you othering people and putting them on the outside.
Yeah.
And this is exactly what you're talking about. It's just another way to put some women on the outside. No,
Mm-hmm.
moms are this.
Yeah.
You're not that.
Yeah.
So you
Mm-hmm.
need to. Somebody else needs to do this for you,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
or you can't play this game because do you see all these check marks you don't meet?
Yeah.
So you're not in it.
Yeah.
You're not
Mm-hmm.
included. And I think that if we are going to, and I love the word reimagine, especially even the child welfare system, all these systems we've talked about, systems towards women, systems towards kids, child welfare, whole litany of things. I mean, if we're going to reimagine that, we've at the core got to start and look at how we've othered people and who's not included.
Yeah.
And how they can be included. So, and what supports do they need to have to be included in this system, and how richer? I can't even, in my mind's eye, when you talk about a family that has a family member that knows that they have, a person that has, that a person with intellectual disability that has raised a child. I in our reimagining, it wouldn't be that she wouldn't have the children. It would be that she would be supported with a very much fortified family system. So her kids never not knew who she was, but there may be others in the family that the
Mm-hmm.
community, of that family helped to raise those kids
Yeah.
in a way that maybe someone else doesn't need, but they still would not be without their mom.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the reimagining of it. Like, how does it look different but still support? And I pulled up the information just so I can let you know, you guys, if anybody wants to read it. It's a woman named the name of Gretchen Sisson wrote "Relinquish the Politics of Adoption and the Privilege of American Motherhood." And that's what we're talking about. And the person that wrote the article about the book is Tatum Hunter at the Washington Post. And it's a fascinating, even if you just read the article, just to look at this whole concept of what we're talking about. Like, who says it's, I'm toying with it because, I'm sitting in my adopted mom's house, and this conversation we're even having is a little on the fringes for some adoptive parents, which I hope they're listening to your podcast. But who's to say you're better?
Right.
Who's to say? I'm not saying that you should be out of the loop of parenting or whatever. If you want to parent, whatever. But when we start using and put labels on that something's better now, what none of us are saying, and I can say without the shadow of a doubt, is, yes, I was outside. Yes, I needed someone to take. I was a kid who needed care, of course. I did not have. So I'm not saying that, but I'm fighting for, before it gets that far, that the, Eves and the whoever moms of this world even have to make that decision or don't feel supported enough in their lives to do that, before it gets that far, there should have been 1,000 different places that she should have been able to run to.
Yes.
And feel safe.
There's like so many levels of and so many things that need to be addressed. Infertility is another one. Is that like make women feel like they're less than if they don't
Othered.
have babies, if they don't push a baby out. You could have raised 1,000 kids in your life, but if you didn't push one baby out, then you're labeled as someone who can't speak about children, or someone who, doesn't know, or you're less than as a woman because the Bible says be fruitful and, fill the earth. And so I think that like that pressure is placed on women so much that women do feel like they need to adopt if they don't have children.
Right.
Like I remember I had my son at 39. So all of those years after I became of age to have a kid, like at least one person said to me, "Hey, when are you having a baby? When's your baby?" They don't talk about your finances, if you can afford to have a baby. They don't talk about if you're actually married or have a relationship. But hey, produce this baby because we think that you should have a baby. But those people are never the ones there when you need childcare, though.
Yeah, no.
See, I wish that wasn't true, but it is. I got pregnant at 30 years old, but in my 20s, it was when you having a baby. I was still single. And it was like, when you having a baby? Can I get married? Can I find somebody who I'm gonna have a baby? I mean, like I can't do it on my own. But the fact that question is always asked, what are you waiting for? When are you gonna have a baby? When, like you said, they don't know your financial situation. They don't know about your relationships.
Well, and in my case, they don't know, something about maybe your personal preference. Isn't that it wasn't like totally off the table. But if you're somebody that's like, I don't know if I want to be a mom, like in this vein. But just like Sarah said, there's a whole bunch of other ways, that if you ask me and you get really close to me, I've even had people say, "Wow, you about the whole mothering thing. Yeah, you do take on and you mother in different situations, stepmother, and there's other ways, other younger people in my life, and they're like, you put a real investment in those young people. You're not just, you're making sure that they have a community around them that, really does love them. You know what I mean? They know, like, if they want to do this, they can come to you because they want this experience in life, and I think that, it's very, but see, that also goes back to, that's a very Afrocentric, very African way of looking. And that's just naturally some of the way that I live out of is the fact that maybe my mothering is more community like, than others, there's, it just naturally grows. I just recently had an interaction with some young people at a university. I went to go speak a couple weeks, and I'm still in contact with this one young lady, and I'm doing these mentoring works. Like, it just organically, but that is the story of my life. And I wouldn't have it any other way. Yeah. So to marginalize that piece of a person is just like, I'll stop. Because to be honest with you, just really quick, I've been thinking about this concept of how I feel like too, even my adopted mom, she was robbed, robbed of the time to really kind of deal with, like what you said, if you are fertility issues or whatever. I don't really get too much into her story since she's not here to speak for herself, but, and others that maybe that was their story, they can have kids. Well, deal with this piece of it first. And if you come back around because you really believe in helping kids that are in care, helping kids that are whatever, then come to it. Or you may just be like, you know what? This didn't happen for me and I fully live. But don't try to fill it with something. Don't try to fill it with a child, because that's not going to work.
Yeah. even to your point where you talk about the organic thing in you that just mothers, I want to talk about the baby boxes because you are in a fight. I think you probably won, but please let's go. Just go straight to the baby boxes. Just go.
Okay, in some respects. So of recent, all over the United States and even international now we're seeing, in the UK of recent and even in Canada, there is legislation that is being put forth to install what we call safe haven baby boxes. And what it is it's women who are in crises, they are encouraged that, if you don't have, you have this other alternative. There's the safe haven laws that say, hey, on the surface, take your baby to a police station, hospital, fire station on the surface and hand them over to someone there. They will, that's a regular safe haven law. The next step of this is to put in a safe haven baby box that says, hey, you don't even have to, we'll install these baby boxes where you can lay your baby in this like incubator type thing. An alarm goes off in the wall of a fire station or a police station or wherever, and you don't even have to talk to anybody and you can walk away. And while, and I am in opposition to this as a United citizen of the independent citizen of the United States of America. I'm in opposition to this practice because, and I've spoken up in the Tennessee House of Representatives and the Colorado. Tennessee, we didn't, the law didn't get stopped, but in Colorado it did. But, I'm in opposition of this because it's very, very harmful to mothers in crises and children as well. Ultimately kids, but it puts people in harm's way to bleed out. That would, by the grace of God, I hear, and my mother lived, you know what I mean? Like to tell the story. But when she had me on her, on her bathroom floor or whatever, she could have bled out. And so what we don't want is, we don't want people in a crisis making decisions to say, oh, okay, well, I'm going to hold this close to the vest for 9 months and I'll just put my baby in one of those boxes. Right. When we really want people to know that, yes, you can have a baby in a hospital. If you want to, there's paper, you can disclose as much information as you want to on the paper, have your baby in the hospital safely, or walk away. But you still had it safe. You're safe. The baby's safe. And I think this gets back at what Sarah's talking about, our mom having the presence of mind to even put some level of safety in what she was doing, and I think that this does not. And if you watch the representative that had actually put the bill up and he was defending it against some of what I was saying, he was like, well, we don't care about the moms at this point. And he just kept like waving his hand. Or when you would mention things about the moms, we care about saving these kids because they'll die out there if they're not, and it's like, no, we care about all of it. And right. You, in my statement that I say all the time now, you'd never have a kid in crises where you don't have a mom in crises.
Exactly. Right.
You don't have a kid in crises that don't have parents in crisis.
And there was a point that Patrice made in her testimony in Tennessee when she talked about the scientific aspect of that exchange of cells from the mother and the child. So there's a connection that has already been formed in utero, and then, snatching the baby out, putting this newborn whole human life in a box by themselves, and how much trauma that is.
Yeah.
And we know the science of skin to skin, connections, even for babies to thrive, how important it is for them to have that touch. And so it was I love that Patrice did include that in her testimony. Even though um things didn't turn out exactly how we wanted them to, is that the information was out there, was put
Right.
in the universe and put in the minds of all those people sitting in that room, or
Yeah.
that had the opportunity to go back and watch.
Yeah. So the important thing that we learned from, because Sarah was behind some of this and helping me write this, is the important thing that we learned about this whole thing is, and then what I will tell people from that experience: if you feel strongly about something, yes, you have the right as a U.S. citizen to go testify. But also is that, and I'm going to say it from the rooftops, and this is not, and I love saying this because you don't know with me saying this whether I'm a Democrat or a Republican.
Right.
By saying this, politics won out.
Yeah.
They heard exactly what I had to say. They heard the facts. They knew the facts.
Mm-hmm.
The next week that they came back, they went all around, and there is a political machine of a certain persuasion that said you have to vote this way. So that's why it's important to get down in as constituents with your legislators, because to say no, we did not agree with you voting that way. Especially when moms' lives are in danger. I don't care what side of the fence I'm on. I care about people's lives, moms and kids' lives in danger. And I can't let you pass this.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just wanted to say too, the point that Sarah made too, really quickly, is that people don't realize we're talking about babies. We're talking about human beings that grow up into being adults.
Exactly.
And these are the adults that are going to have the attachment disorder and all this other kind of stuff, because we already, those of us that adoptees do, and we have therapists and we have all the other tools we use, but you're just going to have more of it going on.
Exactly. And to think that someone thought it was a good idea to place a brand new human being in a box is beyond me. A brand new human being in a box. I mean, I spoke with another gentleman a couple of weeks ago whose mother passed away from his birth. But he was in the care of his maternal grandmother for the first 2 years. So it takes me back to your point, the fact that mothers could bleed out. So what's going to happen to you? We're not just thinking about the baby. Yes, the baby is very important, as is the mother. How come she's not able to get the medical attention she needs without being shunned because y'all made it okay for her to just put the baby in a box and go on about her business? Who knows that she's able to go on about her business? She's already, because she has no medical attention. Why? Because she thought, oh, okay, I'm just going to do this at home, put the baby in the box. And now she thinks she may not even wake up the following day. And we are making this okay.
Because we're 9 times out of 10, back to full circle, the conversation you guys were having.
Yeah.
We're talking about lower income. We're talking about we're talking about whether, no matter the income, we're talking about people who are in compromised situation or in crises.
Yeah.
And it just got to me. So you care more about your party than you care about talking about and helping me and others figure out solutions for people who are in a crisis situation.
Yeah. How crazy
Look,
is this?
This isn't about them kids.
Right. Exactly.
Recently, I don't know, my son goes on these rabbit holes and finds these stories. And so it reminded me of an incident that happened maybe 2008. There was a woman that had lured a pregnant woman to her house, and she cut the baby out of her stomach. So I remember I'm seeing this when it played out, but I didn't until today actually read the history of the woman that had committed those crimes. That she was pregnant the first time at 12. and she had a miscarriage. And then she had another one after. But I think that just all of that trauma, I'm not justifying what she did to, kill that woman and take her baby, but because none of that trauma was addressed when she was 12. Then
Exactly.
again, when she was in her 20s and had lost a baby. And if we constantly just keep telling women, especially Black women, oh, just get yourself up, dust yourself off, and go back to doing what you were doing, like we're going to constantly keep having, situations where things happen to kids if we're not building up women enough to help them deal with trauma, to deal with childhood trauma for one, because being pregnant at 12 is childhood trauma.
Exactly.
And
It
then
absolutely is.
you go into your 40s, you're still struggling to have kids, and and then when I looked at her case, she was charged and spent 10 years in jail for trying to kidnap another woman's baby out of the hospital. So had been years and years of this building up to what she initially did. And like with our own mother, is that like there had been years of trauma, building up. She had been sexually assaulted as a child. She had these, a baby already by a man who didn't claim a child. So then
Yeah.
you add another baby on there, and we expect her to just be okay and not to break, but that's not the case.
And not to mention in a, let's just call it semi-secret relationship. You had all these family
Mhm,
members that really didn't know my dad.
Yeah.
That's a secret
mhm,
relationship. That's not
Yeah.
a dude that's really coming around all
Yeah.
that much with his men. As I've been around my uncles and aunts, they like to talk. I
Right.
mean, they be
mhm,
like. So it's something about it and about her life that she felt she needed to keep seeing this man, and that's the part that I really am dealing with of recent, like of what secrets and shrouded in that kind of how you're moving. That's not, this is not really. This isn't funny. We joke,
Right.
and I know I
Yeah.
got like those little, the little clubs or whatever, and a song I was listening to. I left home because my side piece or whatever. That stuff is funny. People talk about side piece or whatever, but you really got to think about that's the kind of stuff that
mhm.
leads to,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's
You get it.
shame. There's
It's
shame
like our
associated with side pieces.
Yeah.
There's shame
Yeah.
associated with secret relationships going
Yes.
on.
when you look at it from the political standpoint, is that if those people in that room felt like, okay, we have these millions of dollars that we can invest in women, or we can just invest in these boxes, and they pick the boxes,
Right.
and it's like
How
when
crazy
we
is that?
look at how we
Mhm.
do need the political people to put the figures that are making these laws to invest in issues that involve women's health, women's mental health, maternal health, and things like that in order to break these cycles. And so as women, we have to stay active in the forefront and on that battlefield, constantly reminding these political figures of not just our mother's stories, but also our stories and our daughter's stories and
Yep.
our, all the women that are going to come after us. We
Mhm.
have to
Yeah.
keep keep that constant in their minds, because we can expect, and don't get me wrong when I say this, is that there are some men that do understand the gravity of investing in women. But for the most part, that's not the case, is that men aren't going to understand how important it is for women to receive this additional support. They Men that sat right in that room felt like, okay, we have an organization here willing to help mothers, but because politically in the way the money moves around, it makes more sense for us to use these boxes that was just a prime example of why we have to stay active, and we can't just relax on our laurels and just say, "Oh, they'll figure it out."
Yeah. And another point that I want to make, because you said something, Sarah, another point that I want to bring up is the fact that specifically in the African American community, how when we go through trauma, we don't know how to identify certain things as trauma, first and foremost. But even when we do, the whole idea of therapy is stigmatized because it's associated with insanity and having lost your mind. So not only did you go through something traumatic, but now you can't even get the proper help that you need. Why? Because you're going to be made fun of. And that is, it can be across the board, but specifically in African American communities, the fact that therapy is stigmatized and not even being able to identify trauma. And I say that because I spoke with another gentleman just a few days ago, actually a week ago, whose mother had her first child at 12 years old because she was the victim of a sexual assault. And so as she continued to have children, the way she coped with that was with the use of drugs. And this is the story that he shared with me, is actually, on my channel. But the way that she decided to cope with that was with the use of drugs. There's no reason why at 12 years old, a young girl has become the victim of something so horrific and then is not able to get the proper help that she needs. It's going to just be a repeating cycle, because she's going at 12 years old. She could be a grandmother at 24.
And I think that even in spite of everything that our mother went through, I think that she recognized that, and she, to the end, she was always advocating for mental health. She was advocating for women because she understood the gravity of what happens when we don't have that support and advocacy, that children end up like Patrice. Children end up like me and my brother in foster care. And I think that that's why I'm not saying what happened to her happened for that reason, but it gave her a perspective that she could talk to other people and say, I can completely understand what you've done, because these are the things that I've done. And here's where I'm at this point trying to receive help, because she went through therapy and she was adamant about Black people receiving mental health care. She was adamant about removing the stigma from that care. And, she was always championing for a single mother. And when I look at it now, I can see that, that was all because of the experience that she had without the support.
Y'all, oh boy, listen, let's go ahead and end this, because y'all know we can talk about this all night long. And I'm so glad that y'all were able to take the time out to sit with me and talk with me and just be transparent. We need this, we need so much more of this. And because y'all said yes to my request of joining me on this platform and sharing your stories, and then getting into some other parts of it, the meat of it, and where it actually all starts. It's important for us to share our stories and talk about this as often as we can. And because y'all chose to do it with me today, because I know y'all are busy, I know y'all are, but y'all chose to do it with me today. And I thank y'all so much.
Thank
Ladies
you.
and gentlemen, we thank you for watching. But if y'all are doing anything that y'all want us to keep up with, Sarah or Dr. Patrice, please share your Instagram handles so that we know how to stay in touch with y'all and see what's going on in your world.
For sure. DRPS Martin 76 Instagram.
Sarah Lynn 40, the word 2, 40 TOO on Instagram, and Sarah Lynn Murphy on Facebook.
Oh, y'all. Okay, we're going to end this, but y'all, I thank you so much. Thank you all for watching. This is another episode of Once in Orphan, and it's awesome. This is y'all want to stay in touch with.
Sounds bad.